Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business.
Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. Joining Michael on the show today is Dean West, who's the founder and president of Association Laboratory, Inc., renowned for his roles as a speaker and facilitator at national and global association leadership meetings. He is also the acclaimed author behind the popular blog From My Seat at the Bar. Now, as you're about to hear, Dean outlines the challenges many new consultants face when trying to grow their firm. And you'll hear Dean had to restructure his organization at one point, which took him up to 5 years to do so. And if you're a consultant and you're motivated to elevate your business, say from 6 to 7 figures, and want to avoid the same mistakes that Dean made, we have something just for you. We're offering a free consulting blueprint that can be your guide to growing to 7 figures. To download it free, all you have to do is visit consultingsuccess.com/guide to secure your free copy today, or you can find the link in the show notes section of Dean's episode. Okay, so now let me tell you a little bit more about what you're going to learn in today's episode. The first is the number one mistake consultants make when launching their practice. How to create a business that isn't revolved around you. How to create an engagement period to grow your funnel. How to utilize publications to grow your brand. How to differentiate yourself from other consultants in the marketplace. How to improve your profit margins. And Dean's 4-step approach to landing a speaking gig. Plus, so much more. Here to share with you his insight and story is Dean West. Enjoy.
Why don't we start off and just have you share concisely what does the Association Laboratory do?
Sure. Association Laboratory is a consulting firm that serves the trade and professional association industry sector. And so I joke that our clients range from the American College of Surgeons on one side of the spectrum to the Institute of Makers of Explosives on the other side of the spectrum. And we do 3
What a
things.
combination.
Yeah, exactly right. So we get the whole range of nonprofit organizations, social service, trade groups, professional societies, et cetera. We do 3 things, really. One is we provide strategic planning and strategy services. So we're a full service research company, do what I would call traditional strategy consulting work. 2 is we're the leading source of sector research on the association sector by far, and that's through our Looking Forward dashboard. That's free for people to use who are interested in the nonprofit sector. And then finally, we produce leadership education and competency development, and that ranges from our healthcare CEO conference this February, as we're doing it again, to white papers and other resources that we produce. The idea behind it is we try to help trade and professional association leaders make better decisions.
So not everybody, wakes up and goes, I'm going to start serving the association market. Take us back in time a little bit. What were you doing before you got into this, and what made you decide that this was the area that you really wanted to focus on?
I grew up in a small town in central Iowa, and my father was a politician. And when I got out of college with my marketing degree, he suggested I become a lobbyist. I have never gotten a good answer for him why he thought I would be good at that, but I became a lobbyist for the Iowa Medical Society by cold calling on associations in Des Moines. I then started going to Chicago because if I got to Chicago, a staff member of the American Medical Association could take me and all her friends out for free on her expense account. And it finally dawned on me I could get a job in Chicago. So I went to work for a consulting firm that ran professional societies, and I worked for the American Society of Clinical Oncology. I then became an executive director of 2 different associations and also an owner of that firm as part of a buyout by the management team. And what I discovered was, despite the fact I had interesting work and I'd always had good bosses, I even had an ownership stake at this point in my life in my young 30s, I was still frustrated by the lack of freedom I felt I had to design the sort of organization I thought would be fun to work at, an organization that revolved around the people and not vice versa. And I felt, frankly, just limited. And so I started the company in 1999. We celebrate our 25th anniversary next year. I'm excited about that. Now wishing I'd taken more pictures in my young 30s, 58 today, about that startup. But my fundamental inspiration was I felt limited by some of the companies I had been working with and for, even ones I enjoyed working with and for, with good bosses and good staff teams, and wanted to create my own vision of a culture, my own vision of the work, and frankly, just give myself more freedom to do what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely resonates and aligns with a lot of the research that we've seen when we've done studies of consulting success. A very common reason for people to venture off and build their own consulting business is because exactly what you said, they want more freedom, they want more flexibility. Another very common one is to be your own boss or unlimited income earning potential or being able to make a greater impact. So some of those things that you mentioned clearly connect with what we often see. So take us to that time. You decide you're going to leave the stability, quote unquote, stability of full-time job. You're working in Chicago. When you decide to go off 1999 and establish the association laboratory, how did you get your first few clients? What did you do to actually start bringing in business?
I think it began more organically. I think when you hear the story of people's company origination story is the phrase we use. And you picture someone working 90, till midnight after work every day, writing business plans and plotting this all out. And I think the reality is it's just more organic. When I realized I had come up against a wall at my current firm, we didn't have a good management team, and I was part of that team. So I was part of the problem. And I didn't have the ability to fix it internally. And I just didn't have the competencies to do it. Okay. And so I introduced other organizations, and other organizations, frankly, had similar challenges and similar opportunities. So I didn't see myself really doing anything different at the end of the day. And so gradually over time, what became apparent was it was time to try and hang out my own shingle and see if I could make it as a consulting firm. And I say it like that because what's really common nowadays are people, all of us get calls from our friends, I'm a consultant now. Well, what they're really doing is trying to get some gig work before their next full-time job. And I think your mentality when you say, I am starting a company is different than say, I just want to make it through the next 6 months because I hate my job. And so I committed to starting my own firm. Part of that, though, was to take an honest look at myself. Now, one of the things I did at my old firm was I had done business development before. I'd worked with boards of directors. I provided the consulting services. I looked at the operational and legal mechanisms as part of my job. So I did feel I was getting into an arena that I was unfamiliar with from a competence side. And I was working in an industry in which I had an existing reputation. So I wasn't a stranger to the work, and I wasn't a stranger to the marketplace. So I always remember the first day at work, though, because I started the company out of my condo. I was single time out of my condo in Chicago. And on my very first day of work, I walked across the street with my laptop, my newly purchased laptop that I bought when I cashed in my 401k, and I typed a list in. And that list became a list of prospects that we faxed I faxed a list to, saying Association Laboratories open for business, give us your money. More fun than that in the actual text. That was the announcement of the company.
And what happened when you did that? When you sent that out, what was the response, if any?
So it was a letter it was a letter denouncing it. Then we followed up with a fax letter that had a fax response sheet. So if you're interested in services, fax this back to us. For those of you who are younger reviewing this, you can look up fax on ChatGPT and what it was. So we had a response. I had a response mechanism, and that started to generate kind of the initial activity. I did know of a person looking for work who I had worked with historically and basically said, I'm just starting this firm. You've got this engagement. Do you mind hiring me? So I had a first client. I also went, and I think this is where people sometimes sabotage themselves. I went to my current company and said, I'm leaving. Mm-hmm. You have clients that I'm responsible for. I will continue to be responsible for them until you can find somebody else. So I worked with my old firm, of which I was one of the stockholders. I worked with my own firm for almost 8 to 10 months.
Was that done still as an employee, or did you adjust
paid by the hour?
Okay, so you shifted it more to a contractor kind of model.
Hourly. So again, you think I'm 32 at the time. And so I would send them an hourly invoice once a month for hours on behalf of the client. It saved them from having to go through these transitions with clients. It saved them having to find somebody immediately. They knew who I was, I knew who they were. But what it did for me most importantly was the thing that frightens people, I think, when they start in consulting is, where's the money come from? Mm-hmm. So the more money you have, the more time you have. The more time you have to get a client, the more time you have to correct for mistakes, things of that nature. And so I started with cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
I had engagements with my previous firm. It was negotiated out with them and it was good for them, good for me. I had a new client. And for the first 6 months in particular, I wasn't suddenly burning through savings, burning through credit and putting things on credit cards, things like your mortgage.
So Dean, one thing I just want to point to on this, actually a couple of things. You talk about you're making your previous employer, right? Kind of almost your first client. We've seen in our studies about 50% of all consultants, their first client is a previous employer. It may not be the most recent one, but it's a previous employer, which I think just goes to reinforce what you're saying is, the importance of making sure that you value relationships and take care of them, because you never know where those kind of opportunities will come from. And the other thing that I just want to point to that you mentioned is you talk about the mindset that you had, which was not to just try and land a gig or do work. You were thinking, it sounds like from very early on, being intentional about building a consulting business or a firm, right? As you called it. So this is a big difference between the mindset of a consultant/contractor, the person who's just thinking about delivering and thinking that just doing work is enough, and somebody who's actually thinking, well, I need to run a business, and therefore I need to think about business development. I need to send letters out. I need to do faxes. I need to do follow-up, whatever it is, really tap my network. And so I'm getting the sense that for you, in addition to being very conscious of kind of managing your cash flow, finding ways to reduce risk when you're looking to launch the business, you're also very intentional and very proactive on the business development front and making sure that the work was going to be there or there was more chances for it to be. Does that sound accurate?
I think the more subtle nuance behind this, Michael, is you make different decisions when you started a company than if you're just biding time to your next job. When I first started the firm, that was very subtle. One is it's Association Laboratory. It's not Dean West Consulting. Because if I tie it to my name, it becomes harder to separate it. What if I want to sell the company? Well, if Dean West is, again, that works for, think of some of the big consulting firms that are named after Deloitte and some of the others. So it's subtle choices. That's the age of the answering machine. I had a woman leave the answering machine message, so it wasn't always Dean's voice. I always speak in the we, not the I. We are going to do this. So what it does is in your mind, help you understand you have this separate entity that you are responsible for sustaining and growing, but the entity also has responsibilities to you. I joke with my friends that Association Laboratory as an entity is designed to give me lucrative, interesting work. That's the job of the company. And so if it's not doing that, I, as Dean West, the person, I'm not obligated to keep doing it. In fact, I reassessed when I turned 50 whether I wanted to keep running Association Laboratory. I'm not obligated to keep doing it for the entirety of my life. If it's not doing its job, why should I keep doing it?
I want to make a little note of that and come back to it, because I think you just brought up something that is probably on the mind of people depending on where they're at kind of in the the chapters of their book of life. Let's go from the past, and we're going to jump around a little bit here because there's a lot of ground I want to cover, but take us from the past to the more present time. On the marketing and business development side of things, what has that evolved to? What are you finding right now at your company is working best to generate leads, build your pipeline, create conversations? What does that look like today?
When you look at a lot of consulting, I should say a lot of professional services firms, their size is really dictated by the number of principals. If you and I, Michael, start a company today, you and I have our combined networks. If we do it by ourselves, it's just us. So from a marketing standpoint, one of my first goals was, how do we generate leads for business that don't involve Dean shaking someone's hand? Okay, we do that through a content and education strategy. Two is, how do we create a price premium for our services? The sector research in particular does that for us. And so when you think of our white papers that we produce and we talk about our sector research, what that does is cast a wide funnel across our sector of people that Dean has never met. Okay. We have a diverse product portfolio strategy. We work in a wide variety of arenas. So we currently have retainer agreements with healthcare societies. We've worked on emerging leader programs. We work in the DEI space because multiple channels across a wide funnel increases your revenue.
So I just want to hit on that marketing and business development point. So what I'm hearing you say is it sounds like the main thrust and focus is content, which can include data, studies, creation of content, intellectual property. So that's not associated necessarily just to you or to your name, more to the company, but it's the focus is to put that out there so that it can essentially kind of quote unquote sell without selling.
Exactly right. We're building our brand strength in the marketplace, and we're using technical platforms to give as broad a reach as possible. That has evolved into a revenue stream.
Okay. And when you say technical platforms, can you just explain what that means for those that aren't familiar?
LinkedIn. You can publish yourself on LinkedIn for effectively nothing.
Right. Okay.
We put together a list of several thousand potential prospects in our sector that we talk with once a month. And so it's, in order to be successful, you have to identify and reach a substantial market. Those are read out of.
How are you doing that? When you say that you have this list of high value ideal clients, you're in touch with them once a month. Is that an email? Is it picking up the phone? Is it inviting to?
It's a passive email newsletter.
Okay.
We make it very simple. It's not particularly sales oriented. It's more a resource. Nobody has the time to talk to us once a week, so we don't waste their time, but we consistently produce it in the first week of each month. And it's cleverly called our education update. That will have links to that month's educational opportunities, some free, some we charge for. I have special notifications of some particular thing. If I'm speaking at an event and it's relevant to them, we might put some of that. There'll be a tip, but it's basically one page. It is not big. It is not complex. My blog from my seat at the bar is probably the most popular thing we do on that front. And so if you are a prospect, what we're trying to do is create a minimal relationship with you and educate you about the breadth of our activities. Our free stuff, the industry sector research, you can access for free, but you have to register. That puts your name onto our list. That creates a relationship with you. Now you're on the list and we can talk to you. If you're uncertain about how much money to give us, maybe you come to one of our webinars for $30, $40. The financial barriers to entry to have a relationship with are pretty low at that stage. You get more experience with us. Come to one of our face-to-face events. That's $600, $700. Maybe you pay a couple of thousand to come have me speak. Then maybe it's consulting. So our price pyramid our engagement period is really wide and free to very narrow and expensive. So at the top end, how do we get you engaged with us as quickly, easily, and with as low as cost as possible so we can talk to you and then try to walk you down that funnel into the more substantial numbers into
right. So another way just to kind of say that, hopefully this will be helpful for some, but you're casting or at the top of the funnel, right? The goal is building the audience. So it's still trying to attract people that are relevant, that could be ideal clients, but it takes very little of your time, right? It's one to many in terms of creating a newsletter, content, whatever it might be. That brings a lot of people in. And then over time, there's different opportunities for people to engage with you at different levels, from free to tens of dollars, hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, right? All the way down to the highest kind of value and highest price or fee, which would be the actual consulting engagements. So you'll have far fewer people down there, but there's a lot of opportunity for people to build a relationship with you or get to know you without necessarily having to invest a lot of money upfront.
Our key to this is on our content. So just publishing stuff on LinkedIn, for example, you're one of a billion people. Because of the sector research, we can talk to our market in a much more evidence-based way. So we have sector research no one else has. So ranging from my speeches to it informs our webinars to the whole bit. So the sector research, if you are on a board of directors, you could come to our sector research. You could register for free. And there's some value to that. You don't have to check in all the time. You're free. And you can access and customize that data to your sector. You can customize it to state or province or global. You can customize it by industry, et cetera. Download it and use it for free. Now you're in our list.
That's really huge. Last week, I was talking to a bunch of clients about the value of leveraging data, right, in their business. And so I'm really happy to hear you share that, because you're right. What's going to cut through the noise? How are you going to stand out, right? If you're one of many. And I think, it doesn't matter right now, like for anyone who's joining us, whether you're running $100,000 a year consulting business or a $10 million a year consulting business or anywhere in between, there's opportunity for you, if you're not already using and leveraging data, to do more with it, because that will likely really differentiate you from everybody else who's just kind of sharing the same things over and over again.
Well, and I'll go back to the start. So when I first hang my shingle out by myself as a consultant, everybody with a laptop in my sector is a theoretical competitor. So how do you separate yourself? As my company grew and we became better and more sophisticated, our competitors became better and more sophisticated. I don't compete with a person with a laptop anymore. Now I compete with established firms who also have good people, who also have proven processes, who also have good track records. Some are friends of mine. They're all really good. So how do you, regardless of your size, how do you differentiate yourself in the market relative to the people you compete with? When I hang my shingle out, I'm not competing with really good firms at the top end of my sector. Okay. And no one expects me to. I'm less expensive. Okay. So I'm competing with somebody with a laptop. But as we got better, our competitors got better. So the sector research for us is a way, we call it research driven and peer informed content. So it's not Dean just writing a thing or one of our strategists writing a thing. It comes out of the sector research. And the sector research then allows us to differentiate ourselves on the consulting side. You hire us for consultants, we know what the rest of the sector is doing and nobody else does. So that it all ties together. So that's the nature of the pieces of the puzzle. And again, it's all designed to generate leads for business across the spectrum of price, where somebody in our staff doesn't have to shake a hand, and to build our brand strength to the extent that we can get a price premium on our core services. So our core strategic planning service is almost twice as expensive now as 5 years ago for effectively the same service.
Hey, it's Michael here, and we'll be right back to the podcast. But first, are you ready to grow, scale, and take your consulting business and marketing to the next level? If so, our Clarity Coaching program may be a great fit for you. You'll work with our experienced team to set up a strategic plan for your business and coach you step by step in areas like how to consistently attract more leads, develop a magnetic message that resonates with your ideal clients, strategically package and position your services, earn higher fees, win more proposals, and scale your business. To find out more about Clarity Coaching and apply, go to consultingsuccess.com and click on coaching.
So I want to ask you more about associations. Associations are a really big opportunity for consultants if they're strategic and proactive with them. You're somebody who's lived and breathed that ecosystem for many, many years. For a consultant who wants to, let's say, write for an association publication, newsletter, blog, whatever it might be, or speak in front of an association because the members of that association are their ideal clients, let's just go through a few questions that might be relevant to them. I think, first of all, number one, who should they target? So let's just say they've found an association that they believe their ideal clients are part of. Who should they be reaching out to in that association to try and find those speaking or writing opportunities?
Yeah. Generally speaking, it will be through an education or a meetings person, like the chief staff person responsible for education, chief staff person responsible for meetings, because they'll be, and there's some more variation in that, not to get too nerdy about it, but the association will have a mechanism that's generally pretty easy to identify off the website that is responsible for program development.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you wouldn't suggest like going after the executive director or somebody, let's say at a higher level?
Well, that's the challenge. And sometimes it would be the executive director, in others it would not. So it'll vary. And generally speaking, by the way, the staff will be very cooperative in telling you who you talk to. So if you call up and say, I speak at conventions and say, like, who should I speak to? They'll know who to send you to and will generally be cooperative. There are some groups where associations aggregate themselves. The largest in the world is based out of DC. It's called the American Society of Association Executives. And so they do an annual convention for every August, for example. Also, for those of you who are more interested in speaking and facilitating, who have an agent, ASA often works with speaker agencies to showcase speakers at that event and others. And so working with the National Speaker Association and stuff like that. So it really depends. So we go to ASA and are really active at ASA through the year because that's an organization that aggregates our market.
And can you just say again or share what ASA stands for?
The American Society of Association Executives.
There we go. Okay. So for those that aren't in the US, right, look for something maybe equivalent in your own country.
What you will see is outside of the US, the association industry is far less developed. Outside of the US, the biggest center is Brussels because of the EU. There's agencies in South America and Africa. They're much, much smaller. I've spoken at the Indian Association Congress, the Dubai Association Congress. They are a tiny fraction of the size of the United States.
Got it. Okay. So kind of these are groups of people inside of all the different associations. So if you want to speak, for example, to a construction association, somebody from the construction association may be at the ASA to meet with other people in associations. And that's where that's a central point. So that makes sense.
There are also state groups, like there's an Iowa Society of Association Executives or an Ontario Society. There are also some specialty groups. National Association of Manufacturers has a leadership group. Chamber of Commerce has what they call the Committee of 100. So there are other smaller entities that you can access more locally. And generally, if you know somebody who works for an association, you can just ask them, they'll tell you. They'll say, go to the Georgia Society of Association Executives. It's not that difficult to identify with a little online research.
Yeah. I mean, my experience has been there's plenty of associations and opportunities out there for people who are looking for them. So let's then take a step forward and assume that somebody who's joining us right now is thinking, okay, yeah, like I could do more with associations that I'm not doing right now. I want to write, I want to speak, I want to whatever, get in front of my ideal clients through these associations. In your experience, Dean, what should somebody say if they want to reach out to land a speaking opportunity or land a writing opportunity? Is there anything that you've found is helpful or kind of in terms of the right language? And then at the same time, is there anything maybe that they should be avoiding and not saying?
I think what I would say is overwhelmingly associations are small businesses. A big association will have a $25, $50 million budget. So the pyramid of the industry is really tiny at the top and really huge at the bottom. So what that means is you're dealing with small businesses. They don't have a lot of time. They don't have a lot of extra resources to navigate you. So one is they want to know what their audience is going to get out of you. Okay. So one of the questions I ask when people come to me up speaking is, what do you want the audience to be able to do once they're done listening to me? Want to be motivated and excited? Do you want them to support some new initiative? Do you want them, that sort of thing? Two is you have to demonstrate that you can customize what you're talking about to their audience. When you're speaking to an audience of several hundred surgeons, you say something very different than when you speak to an audience of several hundred commercial mining executives. So how will the things you talk about resonate with this audience? Okay, their leadership challenges would be different if you talk about leadership. If you talk to dental hygienists, which are predominantly women, and want to motivate them or inspire them, you'd say something different than a bunch of commercial mining marketing execs, as an example, who are predominantly men. So A, what is it you want them to do when they're done? B is, what is it you're saying that will resonate with them? And 3, can you prove it? And 4, I would say, is there anything that separates you from all the other people who can answer those 2 questions? So things like a video of people applauding you and how wonderful you are, testimonials, things that show you're not an amateur. And again, everyone else who's good will do that same thing. So what differentiates you? So when I speak, everything starts with our sector research because I know nobody else has it. And so that becomes my differentiator. From a cultural standpoint, I'm a smartass. So I'm really clear on that. I'm not a serious academic speaker. Okay. So they know that the tone and topic and things of that nature will fit that. And other groups, frankly, there are groups that don't want that. They want a serious academic speaker. So like understanding where you fit in the niche of all these other folks becomes critical. Otherwise, you don't know what to say. Why you? You have to be able to answer that question.
No, I think those 4 points are really important. We'll make sure we link all that up and have those listed as part of the show notes at consultingsuccess.com. And because I really like those, I think those will be helpful for people. I want to fast forward then, or maybe actually it's a bit of a rewind from where we are right now, but you mentioned something about when you turned 50, right? So about 8 years ago, I think you said, right? You've been in this business since 1999. And you started to think about, should I continue on in this business? And I want to highlight this a little bit or spend a bit of time on it because I think it's just such an important area to consider. I'd like to, just to hear kind of your experiences. What were you thinking? What were you going through at that time? Yeah, go ahead.
I think there's this mythology of the entrepreneur that we all are deeply passionate about fill in the blank industry or profession. And we all work 90-hour weeks. And it's all we can do to say hi to our spouses or kids because we're so deeply passionate about it all the time. But after 20, 25 years, it also becomes work. And you love going on vacation and leaving it all behind. And frankly, if I had any advice, go on vacation and leave it all behind. Okay. When I was turning 50, I was very frustrated. It's one thing to struggle when you first start. It's another thing to kind of have the ups and downs in any normal business. There's a recession, there's a war, there's all the stuff that impacts us. When I turned 50, I had a great deal of public respect and public facing acknowledgement that we were really good. And we'd gotten awards and all this kind of stuff. We were also going broke. And I was frustrated that I was working so hard to have such a poor company, not in terms of like the quality of our work on our client, all the client facing stuff, but it seemed like we were working really hard to be broke.
And Dean, so I don't mean to interrupt, but I want to make sure that I understand, or if you could fill us in for myself and for others as well. But so take us to that time. Did you have, is it 5 people like today or?
Yeah, we had about a half dozen folks. The year we had our highest revenue was also the year I lost the most money.
So what was going on there? Take us behind the scenes. How is it that had half a dozen people, you're billing, I don't know, whatever you're billing, whatever you can share would be great. But just so we have a sense, like what was going on to cause you to be in that kind of cash flow situation?
Okay. Well, so here's what I did. And we're a little under $1 million in billings. And so our revenue keeps going up and up and up. So we're growing. And at the end of every year, we have less money. We're taking on debt to cover that cash flow. Okay. And one of the things as the owner, like I always looked at I have looked at myself as two responsibilities. One of my responsibilities is to protect everyone else from risk. Like they're getting paid. It's up to me. I'm the one who takes the ownership risk. And so you don't burden your staff with it is one of my philosophies. Okay. The second for me is I'm the safety net. If everything's going wrong, I'm the one who saves it all. I'm the one who gets blamed if anything goes wrong, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So I'm protecting my staff from that financial situation, but I know it as an owner. And it's getting more and more frustrating. And so I came to this conclusion at the time that, frankly, our cost structure was too high. It didn't matter how much more money we made if our cost structure is wrong.
When you say cost structure, do you mean there were just like hard expenses that were much higher, or like you weren't charging enough? The margins weren't strong enough?
We can always charge more. Trouble is our clients get a say in that. So if it was just a matter of raising prices, I'd have raised prices. But our clients get to argue that with us. Okay. So to give you a back of the envelope, one of our people was twice as expensive and worked half as many hours as one of my current staff. So I always use $100 an hour because I can do the math with my marketing degree, but picture 1,000 hours a year at $100 an hour is $100,000. 2,000 hours a year, heavy full-time, 1,800 days full-time at that same 100,000, I cut my cost by half, but I gained that capacity. So my people were too expensive and were working too few hours. I was heavily contractor based. And so I went through a complete business model shift. The other problem we had was creating a cohesive culture. People were working hard in fragments, but we couldn't put people together very well because everybody worked hard. They're all friends of mine still. And I liked it. I don't have a complaint about the people, but the structure was unsustainable. And when we were smaller, it didn't seem as bad. And as you got bigger, instead of losing $1,000, it was 50,000. Instead of 50, it was 100,000. All of a sudden, the numbers got big in just a couple of years because we started growing heavily about 2010, and then we kind of doubled in size, and we've doubled again in size in the last 4 years. But as we got bigger, the losses got bigger, so we had to restructure. And the restructuring took me about 4 to 5 years because we had to phase out people that worked for us. We had to identify and develop new people. And so a quick example, the first person we hired as a full-time person was the same amount of money, hard money, like cash, as a contractor working a third as much. I get all that capacity for the same amount of money. Okay, so we became much more profitable and financially sustainable. That allowed us to invest in the sector research, invest in some of the education, take some risks, frankly, that we didn't have the money before on the education side. And that all helped us. All of this happens, go back to your initial question, when I turned 50, that was one of my frustrations. And I think not the mistake, I'll just say it out loud how I went through it. I was turned 50 and I had a really good network. I had a bunch of public facing stuff. I was speaking all over the world. I was doing all this stuff. I knew I could get a job. And at 50, I'm kind of like, if I'm going to do something different, now's the time. And so I didn't interview. I called a bunch of my friends who I respected and said, I'm going through this. Should I keep doing this? Like, what else might I do? And I would go through the problems I had with the company and all this sort of thing. I came to the conclusion that I wasn't unhappy with my company. I was unhappy with my performance. And when I knew it was my performance that was holding the company back and my not impatience, my unwillingness to fundamentally restructure, that's what was driving me nuts. So I could either get out then, or I could fundamentally restructure. And that's when I began the restructuring of the company.
So it took 4 to 5 years to go from start to finish in that restructuring, which sounds like a long time. And I'm wondering, did you start, once you made the decision to begin the restructuring, once you kind of removed maybe some of the things that, like when you said you recognized it was your underperformance, or it was really about you, not about the company, did you feel a difference when you started the restructuring, or did you only feel it when the restructuring was done? Like how quickly from the time that you were aware of what was going on and it wasn't you, it was you and not the company, did you actually start to feel a difference in the day-to-day kind of running of the business?
I knew it was going to be better immediately, but the daily work was worse because you're still stuck with your old company and you're investing in the new side. So, for example, we were hiring younger staff that required more development because one of our conclusions was we had to create consultants because the people we were bringing in off the street didn't know how to do it. So we actually now have a 6-domain professional development track for a new consultant. Everything from how to do email to critical and strategic thinking. Okay, we have to create consultants that understand how to do it because the core of people in our sector don't know how, even though there's a lot of them who do consulting. And so I had those people starting while I was still working with people that under a structure that was less cost effective. Again, and unrelated to the people are all good, like the people. It's not a criticism of the folks. So you're caught in between. I think where I recognize it was about 3 years later, we had 2 new people that were working really well together. And I should say, let's go with 3 years, 3 to 4 years. I think we had 3 new people at that point. And stuff was just working. You could go to one of our client games and say, okay, somebody has to do this thing. And then, okay. And they just went off and did it. All of a sudden there were clients I'd never spoken to. And people were calling me and say, your staff person did a great job. And I used to have to be part of all those clients to hold it all together. Suddenly I didn't have to be part of it. So
people are so key in a business. And I think as founders, we often can get in our own way.
That's a good description of it. I think you're unwilling to tear it down. It's one thing to read in the Wall Street Journal about how Citibank is restructuring, but when it's your own little tiny firm and it's your life, and you got to talk to your spouse about it and decide if you're going to put more of your own money into it and things of that nature. It's a lot more personal. My quote is, risk is the other person's money. Fear is your own money. Okay. So they teach in business class about managing risk and assessing risk. When it's your house on the line or your kid's going to college, it's not risk, it's fear. Should you put enough money to buy another house into your company that is not performing at that point in time? And so that's the mentality behind it. And so it all worked, but for the most part, but it's like,
is there one thing looking back now on what you've gone through in terms of that transition, knowing what you know today, that you would have done differently, even about the transition itself or early on, just maybe a lesson that you feel could have really made a difference?
I don't know what I would have done differently. I really don't. Part of it, the variable out of this is how much money do you have? Because of our financial performance, we didn't have a lot of money. Money gives you time. And so we could only progress at the speed of new business. As clients came in and as we put money in the bank, we could invest in the shifts. It also takes time to develop someone. Okay, so we just brought in another strategist. The last 2 strategists we hired are more senior. They're a little bit more immediately ready than the first couple. And that's not a criticism of any of them. It's a time issue. And so when I look, for example, at our staff or at our client retention, it dipped at the same time things were getting better financially. And I think it dipped because we went from a client base where I had to touch every client to getting spread really thin with a more junior staff team. Good work, but not great work. And our retention went down, and now our retention is back up. About 30% of our business is from existing clients. So I think you can see that dip where we got spread thin across the client base in ways we just couldn't serve them as well as we wanted in any sort of meaningful way. We did what we promised, we did good work, but not the kind of exceptional work that gets repeat business. And that cost us financially. And I don't think we've really gotten out of it until the last 3-4 years.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for being open and just sharing some of the journey and lessons learned along the way. As I hear you sharing your story, to me, I mean, this is one of the things that I probably appreciate the most about business, which is it doesn't really matter how hard the situation is because you're always going to be in a hard situation, right? At one point or another in business. The beautiful thing to me about business is that if our mindset allows us, if we can kind of not just hunker down and hide, but rather face the facts and be open to dealing with it, we can always find ways to rebound or to build back up. And so that to me is just a beautiful opportunity that we all have to know that if we're in control and if we're open to it and we accept that challenge, right? You can go from being in a very tough situation like you were in at that time to turning things around because you were aware. And I think for you, I just want to highlight this as well. The fact that you reached out to a bunch of different people that you know and respect and asked them for their feedback, that's fantastic because a lot of people wouldn't even take that step, right? They wouldn't be open to that potential kind of criticism or feedback or whatever you want to call it, because they wouldn't want to share the tough time that they were in. But you doing that, right, helped to get some clarity in your mind around, hey, the problem is in the company. It's me and how I'm kind of thinking or operating.
Yeah, what's the Taylor Swift song? Who's the problem? Me, I'm the problem. Where's the lyric?
I would ask my daughters. Yeah, I would have no idea what the Taylor Swift song is, but
so it's I think at the end of the day, when I'm thinking about these things because it is our 25th anniversary next year, and I really never envisioned it going 25 years. That was so alien to me. And for those watching this, when you start your own company of whatever size, whether you start it, whether you buy it, whether you inherit it, whatever it might be, one of the jobs of the company as an entity is to be a platform for your own success, however you define it. And maybe it's financial security. Maybe it's an opportunity to pass on a legacy to your kids. Maybe it's to travel, whatever it might be. And you have to look openly and honestly at your own organization and say, is it acting as a platform the way you want it to act for you? And also for your team. And I tell that to my own team. This company is a platform for what you want out of it. Do you want to speak at conferences? Do you want to write, like whatever it is? If it's not meeting those needs, come on. And I think for me over the years, like I remember this when I spoke at a conference in Dubai, and I remember we were at the speaker table and everyone's talking about like how you got here and stuff like that. And I go, I started out in my career in this little tiny town in central Iowa. I come from down to 1,300 in central Iowa. I worked for a Iowa medical. I don't come from money or any big fancy thing. And tomorrow I'm going to be speaking in Dubai at the World Congress, or Dubai 2021. And that is the result of that is because of the platform my consulting business gave me. And so think of the platform the company can give you and what you want it to accomplish for you as a person and family. If it's not doing that, you're not obligated to keep doing it. Give it to somebody else, shut it down, go to work at Starbucks, whatever you want to do. You're not forced to keep doing it just because you started it. But at the end of the day, it's got to be a platform for your own success. And that's the measure of your success when you're running it.
All right, we're going to leave it at that for today, Dean. I want to thank you again so much for coming on. And for those that want to learn more about you, your work, you also talked about some of the research and data and all that you have. Where's the one place that we should direct people to learn all about all that?
Sure. My most popular thing is my corporate blog, which is called From My Seat at the Bar. And it's because a lot of us sit by ourselves at a hotel bar and jot down on napkins and read and do all the sorts of things. It is an irreverent, arguably sometimes offensive take on the association sector and leadership. You can find it at associationlaboratory.com and just look From My Seat at the Bar. And topics include everything from how my wife called me fat to what deer hunting taught me about consulting, etc. And it's by far the most widely read thing I do.
Well, we will, again, link that up in the show notes at consultingsuccess.com. Dean, thanks again so much for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure. Have a great time.
And there you have it for today's episode between Michael and Dean. If you enjoyed today's podcast, then be sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to your favorite shows. And if you want to help support the Consulting Success Podcast, you can do so by sharing this episode out with a friend or colleague. As a reminder, for show notes, including links to everything referenced in today's episode, including Dean's 4-step approach to landing a speaking gig, be sure to visit Dean's episode page over at consultingsuccess.com. Also, if you want to work directly with the Consulting Success team to receive personalized coaching and support to optimize and grow your consulting firm, just visit consultingsuccess.com/grow to apply today. That's the end of the line for us this week. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until next time.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.